The Maverian flagship erupted in a silent bloom of fire against the velvet backdrop of space. From the command deck of the EFS Indomitable, Admiral Kaida Ravek watched through narrowed eyes, her weathered face illuminated by the tactical display. "That's the fifth vessel they've lost," Commander Izan remarked, his voice flat. "Still no response to our communications." "They don't want dialogue," Kaida replied. They never did. Humanity's first encounter with the Maverians had been catastrophic. They had appeared in the skies above Earth's largest cities without warning, their megastructure vessels blotting out the sun. Their message was simple: submit or perish. Humanity had been given 48 hours to surrender their planet, their resources, their autonomy. 47 hours later, every major military installation on Earth had been reduced to ash. The Maverians hadn't accounted for humanity's final defense protocol, Operation Dispersal. While the invaders celebrated their apparent victory, 12 colony ships had slipped away from Earth, carrying the seeds of resistance. For 2 decades, humans had rebuilt in the shadows of distant stars, developing technologies that merged necessity with vengeance. Now the children of Earth had returned. Kaida's comm unit pulsed. "Admiral," the gravelly voice of General Lysander stated, "the Arcturus fleet is in position. Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani fleets reporting ready." "Acknowledged," Kaida replied. She looked at the tactical display where 3 massive Maverian dreadnoughts hung in formation above what had once been Paris. Their arrogance was palpable. They had never bothered to establish planetary defenses, convinced of their technological superiority. "All vessels, execute Operation Nemesis," Kaida commanded. Across the solar system, human ships activated their quantum phase drives simultaneously. The technology, reverse-engineered from a crashed Maverian scout ship, allowed matter to exist in multiple states at once. 100 ships became 1,000, then 10,000 phantom vessels, each broadcasting identical signatures. On the massive view screen, Kaida watched the Maverian fleet scatter in confusion, unable to distinguish real targets from phantom projections. "They're panicking," Izan observed. "Their targeting systems are overwhelmed. Launch the Prometheus warheads," Kaida ordered, her voice unnervingly steady. Missiles streaked across the void, each carrying humanity's most terrible creation: nanites programmed to dismantle Maverian technology at the molecular level. The Yatsi, weapons passed through their shields as though they weren't there, another gift from decades of studying their technology. The first dreadnought began to disintegrate, its hull seeming to dissolve into glittering dust. "This is just the beginning," Kaida whispered. 23 years ago they demanded Earth submission. Today we begin erasing them from history. Valtor, Supreme Commander of the Maverian Conquest Fleet, watched in disbelief as his flagship's systems failed around him. Warning signals flashed across holographic displays, sections of the ship turning black on the schematic as they simply ceased to exist. "Impossible," he hissed through triple-hinged mandibles. "These primitives had barely achieved interplanetary travel when we arrived." His second-in-command, Krex, frantically worked the controls. "The humans have deployed some form of molecular deconstruction agent. It's spreading throughout the fleet. Seal all compartments. Jettison affected sections," Valtor commanded. "It's too late," Krex replied, voice trembling as he held up his arm, watching in horror as his exoskeleton began to shimmer and flake away. "It's in the air circulation system." On Earth, Cove Malachi stood among the ruins of New Delhi, his environment suit protecting him from the residual radiation. As leader of the Earth Reclamation Force, he had volunteered to be among the first to set foot on humanity's birthplace after its fall. Around him, a team of scientists collected soil samples and set up monitoring equipment. "Command, this is Reclamation Actual," Cove reported, his voice tight with emotion. "We've established our first foothold. Commencing biosphere analysis." "Copy. That? Reclamation," came the response from orbit. Admiral Ravek sends her regards. The Maverian orbital presence has been neutralized. Kove looked up at the sky, where distant flashes marked the death throes of alien warships. Any word from the other colonies? All reporting successful engagements. The Maverians never expected a coordinated attack. 23 years of planning is paying off. Dr. Indra Nahani approached, her face visible through her helmet visor. Kove, you need to see this. She led him to a crumbling structure that had once been a temple. Inside, protected from the elements, was a wall of photographs, thousands of faces smiling from before the invasion. A memorial, Kove realized. Someone survived down here long enough to create this. Look closer, Indra urged. Kove stepped forward, examining the faded images. Among them was a photograph of a young woman holding a baby. The caption beneath read, Qaeda and Kove Ravek, 2089. His hand trembled as he touched the image. My mother, and me. Indra placed a hand on his shoulder. She told me she didn't know if this place still stood. She wanted me to check. Kove's eyes burned. She never told me she named me after my father. She said knowing might compromise your judgment if you were selected for the mission. Above them, another Maverian vessel exploded, raining debris that burned up in the atmosphere like shooting stars. The Maverians thought they understood humanity, Kove said quietly. They thought our technology defined our limits. They never understood that our greatest weapon is our memory. In his hand, he clutched a small device, the trigger for Phase 2 of Operation Nemesis. With a deep breath, he activated it, sending a signal to the waiting fleets. For Earth, he whispered. For everyone they took from us. The Maverian homeworld of Crescitar orbited a blue giant star at the edge of the Sagittarius Arm. For millennia, it had stood as the center of an empire, spanning hundreds of solar systems, its cities spiraling across continents in gleaming displays of technological supremacy. None of its inhabitants noticed when the first human infiltration ships slipped through their defense grid, cloaked in stolen technology. Major Zara Vos led her strike team through the maintenance tunnels beneath the Maverian High Command. Each soldier carried a canister of the same nanites that had devastated the invasion fleet at Earth. Remember, Zara whispered over the tactical comm, we're not here for a body count. Plant the packages and withdraw. Let the nanites do the work. Contact. Lieutenant Riven warned from point position. 2 guards approaching. Neutralize, Zara ordered. No energy weapons. Riven and Corporal Dayu moved with practiced efficiency, their blade gauntlets, designed specifically to penetrate Maverian exoskeletons, making short work of the sentries. Clear, Riven reported. The team continued deeper, guided by schematics, provided by the shadowy human resistance that had been operating on Crescitar for years, descendants of humans taken as specimens before Earth's fall. Meanwhile, in orbit above Crescitar, Fleet Captain Orion Nix observed the planet from the bridge of the stealth frigate Wraith. Alongside him stood Dr. Ilara Sunder, the architect of humanity's deadliest weapon. The nanites we deployed on Earth were just the prototype, she explained, gesturing to the massive deployment pods in the cargo bay view screen. These are the finished product. What's the difference? Orion asked. Ilara's eyes reflected the blue glow of the display. The first-generation deconstructed technology. These target their genetic structure directly, specifically the markers that make them Maverian. Orion raised an eyebrow. You've created a genetic weapon? I've created justice, Ilara replied coolly. The markers will be passed down to offspring. Within 3 generations, there will be no more Maverians. Their history, their culture, their very existence will be systematically erased, just as they tried to do to us. Below, in the capital city of Vexmore, Zara's team reached their target, the Central Environmental Processing Hub for the High Command. Packages set, Zara reported as her team planted the nanite canisters. Remote detonation ready. All teams. Reporting deployment complete, Riven added, checking the tactical network. Zara took one last look at the pulsing heart of the Empire that had nearly eradicated her species. Humanity doesn't seek conquest, she said quietly. We could have bombarded this planet into oblivion. Remember that when the historians ask why we chose this path. Extraction vessels in position, came Orion's voice over the comm. Trigger the packages and get out of there. As Zara's team raced back through the tunnels, the nanite canisters activated, releasing an invisible cloud that spread through the Maverian ventilation systems. Unlike the violent destruction of their fleet at Earth, this attack would be slow, methodical, and absolute. The Maverians would fade from the galaxy not with a bang, but with a whisper. 5 years passed. The war that humanity had launched in a single coordinated strike had evolved into something more complex than simple revenge. Across former Maverian territories, subjugated species were rising up, throwing off centuries of oppression. Diplomat. Rohan Vex stood before the newly formed Galactic Concord, representing the United Colonies of Earth. Around him sat representatives from 27 species, many seeing each other for the first time without Maverian overseers present. The evidence is conclusive, Rohan stated, projecting images of Maverian atrocities above the assembly. For over 8,000 years, the Maverian hegemony conducted systematic campaigns of genetic harvesting, planetary resource stripping, and cultural erasure across this quadrant of the galaxy. The feline representative, a crystalline being, who communicated through light pulses, flashed a series of patterns. The translator rendered it as, "Yet your solution mirrors their methods. The genetic weapon you deployed has reduced their population by 60%. The survivors are sterile. Is this not also erasure?" Rohan didn't flinch. "We made a choice. Conventional warfare would have resulted in billions of casualties across multiple species. The Maverians left us no diplomatic options. And who are you to make such a choice?" demanded the Gorshal ambassador, his scaled skin flushing orange with emotion. Admiral Kaida Ravek, now gray-haired but still commanding, stepped forward. "We are the species that was meant to die quietly. We were supposed to be just another footnote in Maverian expansion. Instead, we became the first to successfully fight back." Across the galaxy, on what remained of Earth, the reclamation efforts continued. Kove Malachi had established a thriving colony in the region, once known as the Tibetan Plateau. The radiation was negligible here, and the first Earthborn generation in decades played among newly planted gardens. His second-in-command, Lyra Vost, approached with a datapad. "Another Maverian enclave has requested asylum. That's the 5th this month." Cove sighed. "Same terms as the others. They can settle in the Australian zone, but they must submit to regular monitoring. Some of the colonists are uncomfortable with having any Maverians on Earth," Lyra noted. "Discomfort is the price of being better than our enemies," Cove replied. "We won't execute civilians or deny refuge to children, regardless of species. On the Maverian homeworld, now under human military governance, Major Zara Vos, now Colonel, supervised the archaeological preservation of Maverian cultural artifacts. As their species slowly faded, humanity had taken on the paradoxical role of preserving what they could of Maverian history. Another memory crystal archive recovered, reported Specialist Torval, carefully placing the artifact in a stasis field. "Good work," Zara replied. "Transfer it to the repository on Luna." They stood in what had once been the Grand Archive of Kreshitar, a structure spanning 3 square kilometers. "Permission to speak freely, Colonel?" Torval asked. "Always." "Why are we preserving their history when our mission was to erase them?" Zara ran her hand along an ancient Maverian text. "We're erasing their future, not their past. Someone needs to remember what happened here. What happens when a species decides that dominance is their birthright? As night fell on Kreshitar, the once brilliant cities now dim and increasingly empty, Zara looked up at the stars and wondered if humanity was writing a warning or a confession. On the frontier world of Novaris, once a Mavarian military outpost, Dr. Ilara Sunder sat alone in her laboratory. Before her lay the culmination of a decade's work, the antidote to her own creation, a genetic therapy that could reverse the extinction cascade in the Mavarian genome. Her door chimed, and she quickly covered her work. "Enter. Admiral Kaida." Ravek stepped into the lab, her uniform crisp, despite the long journey. "Doctor, it's been some time." "Admiral," Ilara acknowledged, rising. "To what do I owe this personal visit? Surely the military council could have summoned me to Earth." "This isn't official business," Kaida replied, setting down a small container on the desk. "I brought you something." Inside was a soil sample, rich and dark. "Earth soil," Kaida explained. "From my childhood home in the Hokkaido prefecture. It's clean now, fertile." Ilara touched it gently. "You shouldn't have risked bringing this through quarantine." "I had it properly sterilized and certified," Kaida assured her. After a pause, she added, "The council knows about your research, Ilara." The scientist stiffened. "Are they here to arrest me for treason?" "No," Kaida said, looking tired suddenly. "They sent me to ask why." In the restored United Nations headquarters in Geneva, now the seat of Earth's government, Chancellor Kove Malachi addressed the Global Assembly. At 48, his hair was graying at the temples, his face bearing the weathered look of someone who had carried too much responsibility for too long. "Today marks the 25th anniversary of the liberation," he announced. "A quarter century, since humanity reclaimed our homeworld and began the long process of healing. The assembly chamber, rebuilt from the ruins using both Earth materials and technological contributions from former Mavarian vassal states, erupted in applause. But today, I am not here to celebrate victory," Kove continued when the noise subsided. "I am here to propose the most difficult decision our species has ever faced." He activated a holographic display showing the current Mavarian population statistics. The numbers were grim. Fewer than 10 million individuals remained from a species that once numbered in the billions. "The genetic dissolution protocol has worked exactly as designed," he stated. "Current projections indicate complete Mavarian extinction within 50 years. Murmurs spread through the assembly. "I have submitted legislation to the Global Assembly that would authorize the deployment of Dr. Sunder's reversal therapy to the remaining Mavarian population." The chamber exploded in shouts and arguments. Kove raised his hands for silence. "We stand at a crossroads," he said forcefully. "Either we complete the extinction of a sentient species, making us guilty of the very crime for which we condemned them, or we prove that humanity's strength lies not just in our ability to survive, but in our capacity for mercy." Across the solar system, humanity watched the broadcast with mixed emotions. On Mars colony, veterans of the Liberation War staged protests. In the asteroid mining outposts, workers hung banners reading "Remember Earth" and "No Mercy for Mavarians." In her lab on Novaris, Ilara watched the broadcast with Kaida. "They'll never approve it," Ilara said quietly. "There's too much hatred." "Perhaps," Kaida replied. "But Kove is right. This was never about extermination. It was about justice." "Is it justice when we become what we fought against?" Kaida had no answer. Instead, she produced a small data crystal. The council voted before the public announcement. In the event the assembly rejects the proposal, you are authorized to proceed with limited deployment to Mavarian children under the age of maturity. Ilara's eyes widened. "A compromise?" "A beginning," Kaida corrected. "Humanity survived because we understand that adaptation is not just physical but moral. The Mavarians never learned that lesson." Outside, the blue-white star of Novaris was setting, casting long shadows across the settlement that humans and the remaining Maverian refugees had built together, a small experiment in coexistence that might soon be replicated across the galaxy. The great hall of the Maverian Remembrance Temple on Luna stood silent save for the soft footfalls of Nix Malachi, grandson of Cove and humanity's newly appointed ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Before him, encased in quantum stasis fields, floated thousands of artifacts, the preserved cultural heritage of a species that had nearly been lost. The final vote had been close, 463 to 459, in favor of implementing the genetic reversal therapy, but with strict conditions. Only children would receive the treatment, and all Maverians would remain under monitoring for at least another century. "I thought I might find you here," came a voice from behind him. Ambassador Trell, one of the few remaining full-blooded Maverians, approached slowly. His once magnificent exoskeleton was dull with age, the biochemical degradation of Alara's nanites evident in the asymmetrical growth patterns. "Ambassador," Nix acknowledged with a respectful bow, "I was just reflecting on what might have been," Trell asked, his multiple eyes focusing on a ceremonial war helm dating back thousands of years. "On what still might be," Nix corrected. "The first generation of treated children are reaching maturity. The therapy worked. They'll be able to reproduce." Trell made a clicking sound that the translation implant rendered as a sad chuckle. "My species will survive, but we are forever changed. Our children look at these artifacts and feel no connection to them. They speak your languages, study your philosophies, dream your dreams. Is that so terrible?" Nix asked. "It is the final victory of humanity," Trell replied. "You didn't just defeat us militarily. You've rewritten what it means to be Maverian." Far, beyond the boundaries of human-controlled space, at the edge of the unexplored regions, the deep-range scout vessel Horizon drifted silently, its sensors probing the void. Captain Lyra Vost, daughter of Zara, studied the unusual energy readings with growing concern. "Analysis complete, Captain," reported her science officer, Dax. "The signals match Maverian communication protocols, but they're different." "Evolved," Lyra frowned. "That's impossible. We've accounted for every Maverian colony and outpost." "There's more," Dax continued. "Based on signal degradation, these communications originated approximately 300 years ago." The implications hit Lyra like a physical blow. "A splinter group. They must have left Maverian space centuries before they encountered Earth." "If they've been developing independently all this time, they might have no idea what happened to their civilization," Lyra finished. "Or that humans exist at all." She stared at the star chart where the mysterious signals originated. History was about to repeat itself. First contact between humanity and the Maverians. But this time, humanity held the technological advantage. This time, they understood the stakes. "Prepare a first contact package," Lyra ordered, "and send a priority message to Earth. The Council needs to know. On Earth, in the rebuilt gardens of what had once been Kyoto, Admiral Kaida Ravek, now well over 100 years old, sustained by life extension treatments, sat with her great-granddaughter, Elara Ravek, named for the scientist whose creation had nearly destroyed a species and whose conscience had ultimately saved it. "Tell me again about the stars, great-grandmother," the child asked, looking up at the night sky. Kaida smiled, following the child's gaze to the heavens. "The stars remind us that the universe is vast beyond comprehension, little one. They remind us that every choice we make ripples across time in ways we cannot predict. Is that why we saved the Maverians? Because of the stars?" Kaida considered the question carefully. We saved them, because in the end, our humanity was more precious to us than our vengeance. That was the true test. Not whether we could defeat them, but whether we could stop ourselves once we had. As if in response, a shooting star blazed across the sky, actually the antimatter engines of a returning exploration vessel, though to the child it seemed like a sign. "The Mavarians demanded our submission," Kata said softly, echoing words from decades past. "We wiped them from history as conquerors and gave them a chance to write a new chapter alongside us. Is that a happy ending?" The child asked. Kaida looked down at her great-granddaughter, at the faint iridescence beneath her skin, the subtle indicators of the genetic therapy that had saved the Mavarian children, and, through careful medical intervention, allowed for the first successful human-Mavarian hybrid generation. "It's not an ending at all," Kaida replied. "It's a beginning." Above them, unbeknownst to either, Lyra's message was already racing toward Earth, carrying news that would once again test humanity's wisdom, courage, and capacity for growth. The stars watched in silence, bearing witness to the unfolding story of a species that had refused to be erased, and in doing so, had found the strength to extend the same mercy to their enemies. In the vast archives of galactic history, it would be recorded not as humanity's revenge, but as humanity's redemption.